All right, microphone on, live stream going, and we can get started here. All right, it is 10:02, so not terribly behind. What's happening, everybody? I'm Pruitt. This is my creator office hours. I like to try to do every week if schedule permits, and this week the schedule does permit. Hope y'all doing all right. I'm unbelievable as always. Wanted to sit down and talk about something for video editing process, and that's within the free software DaVinci Resolve video editor. Now, granted, there is a paid version of DaVinci Resolve, but the free version is still pretty dadgum good. I'll be using the paid version of DaVinci Resolve for this demonstration, but everything I'm going through is applicable inside of the free version too. So if you want to try it out for yourself, feel free to go to blackmagicdesign.com and download DaVinci Resolve for your platform, be it Mac or Windows or even Linux. I believe there's also a Linux version of it too. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Thank y'all for being here. I do these things because the community has seemed to like this type of stuff, the tutorials and like the question and answers. So if you're watching live inside of YouTube right now, feel free to pop up in the chat and ask your questions there. I try to answer them as best I can. And if you have any questions about anything else on the creator space of things, feel free to ask there. Or if you just want to chit chat, go ahead. But I do want to make sure I cover today's topic, the node tree inside of DaVinci Resolve. And the node tree is basically, excuse me, kind of cough. The node tree is basically only handled inside of the color page as well as inside of the fusion page. I'm more concerned about the color page because that's how you do your color grading and your color corrections, if you will. And there's a lot of different things that can be confusing. And there's a lot of different tools in there that are really, really useful that can help you out. So we're going to walk through that stuff today. And let me see if I could switch my screen. Let's see, switching the screen. Yep, there we go. All right, so now let me share my screen with you. Pull that up there. All right, so what you see here is DaVinci Resolve. This is the actual editing page here. You can see if it has these little tabs down here at the bottom. You got the cut page, edit page, fusion page, color page, and then there's also Fairlight for audio and so forth. And then this right here, this is where you would do your regular cutting. If you want to just drop your files in and start working on your timeline, the edit page is where you'd go. And everything you do here is going to translate to each one of these tabs here. And I see some folks popping into the chat there. Let's see there. Hold on. Where's the live chat? There it is. Discussing Trek. Node tree, very powerful, but I'm not sure I can fully wrap my head around it. I've only used it for very simple things. Mr. Bondi's in here. What's up, man? Nodes are why I find DaVinci confusion. I need this. Yeah. I will say this. The node tree on the color page is so much simpler. And for people that are engineering oriented, you'll really pick it up because it's just like programming, but you don't have to be an engineer to get it. I'll say that. Now the fusion page, that's a different story. So let's pop back over here. Thank y'all for being here in the live chat and hanging out with me. All right, so let's pop back over here. Again, this is just a simple file. I have two that I'll be working with today. And let's see, I have that file, and then there's this other file here that I wanted to work with too. All right, and there's a reason for that. So let me pull this down. All right, so this file is shot with my phone, and it's standard Rec 709 footage. And when I say Rec 709, what I'm saying is the standard for all screens, be it your phone, a television, to view content. So whatever you produce as a creator, you need to make sure that you can output it to work on a Rec 709 screen. And in most phones, they do that. Okay. Now this over here, this other piece of footage, this is not Rec 709, at least not yet. This is Canon Log 3 footage. And you notice the color difference in it. So look at that. That's Rec 709, and I haven't even touched the color on it. Haven't touched the color on it. Haven't done any type of correction on anything. This one over here is totally flat. The node tree is really going to be powerful for stuff like this here, this flat footage. So, but let's first just dive into the simple aspect of it. So we'll start with this one here, and I'll jump over to the color page down at the bottom. And you see right here, you get this first node. And if you follow this graph here, this is just a flow chart. So this is your input over here, and this is your output going out to whatever screen you're looking at. And these nodes can do whatever you want them to do from a color correcting and color grading standpoint. If you want to boost up the exposure, you can just boost up the exposure like that, you know. Or if you want to make another node and boost the exposure here, but decrease the exposure over here, you can, you know. And see what happens here. These are what's called serial nodes. So meaning whatever this node is and the information and data that's captured here, it's going to pass on to the next node, and so on and so on and so on. Ideally, you'll be using serial nodes, and you'll also use parallel nodes. Parallel nodes have a whole different story. We'll get into that in a moment, but let's just start with the basics. So again, it's just a flow chart. Starting from the beginning, this node, whatever you put in here is going to affect what happens over here. So let me just reset these to start out with. Reset, reset. All right. So now let's say I just want to lift the shadows in here just because it's a little too dark in this video down here where the people are sitting. And I want to bring out some more detail there. Now you have these wheels over here on the left side. You have the shadow, midtone, highlights, offset. Okay. But this is what's under called the log settings here. Don't touch these just yet. We'll get into those later. So you need to go to the default window, which is this one. It says lift, gamma, gain. I'm usually in and out of the log settings a good bit because I have that kind of footage to work with. So, but by default, this is what you're going to see first. Lift, gamma, gain, which is essentially shadows, midtones, and your highlights. And then this offset is considered like your global settings here. And then over here, you have the scope section. Now, right now, it's currently showing the vector scope. This vector scope is used for understanding the saturation in your image. Right now, I don't care about the saturation. So I want to go and take a look at either my RGB parade or my waveform because I'm worried about the luminance of the image, the shadows and the highlights and so forth. So I like to play in the parade like that, or you can use the waveform. Okay. So if you look at this scale here, this is your shadows at the very bottom. Of course, midway is your midtones, and at the top is where your highlights are. And at the bottom and the top of these, you do not want a flat line going across because that means you're clipping or crushing. But right now, again, the shadows are all the way down to 0. We want to lift that up a little bit. So again, if we think about what's happening over here on these wheels, oh, wait a minute, my little face is over there in the way. So let me move my face. There. Is that better? Sorry about that. So again, lift, gamma, gain. This is essentially your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights right here with these 3 wheels. And since we're wanting to attack the shadows, we want to go to this lift wheel. And they all have these little bars at the bottom of it. So you can just scroll left to right. So if I scroll left, it's going to make it even darker in the shadow section. We don't want that. I'm going to scroll to the right and lift it up just a little more. And you'll notice if you look at the waveform over here, you don't want this to be touching at 0. As I lift up the shadows, you'll start to see more detail show up in the image. And you'll also notice the graph is not going to touch that 0 anymore. So let's pull that up. There we go. All right. So now if I zoom in, I can actually see that she's wearing a backpack or something right there, where originally I could not. It's a little dark. So let's just pull that back up some more. I went a little too far, but there. So now we got decent shadow settings here inside of this. So that now we can just move on to our next node if we want to, or we can just say we're done. Some people like to move into another node to do things like saturation. So we'll go ahead and just reset this node. And I'm going to start over here. Let's do the shadows on the first one. Let's do it that way. There we go. So now we got our shadows lifted there. And then in the next node, we'll make this one our saturation. So I'll just label this sat like that. And you have very simple saturation settings down here at the bottom. And if you want to increase it, just increase it. That looks horrible, but for the sake of YouTube, I'm just pushing it up all the way so you can see the difference. If you want to decrease it and make it down to a grayscale, you can. But no, we don't want that. We want to just boost it just a little bit. We'll do it about 52 or so. Okay. And then if you look over here to the left, there's this color boost option. This is not the same as saturation. Okay. So saturation is looking at a global level of color. And it's going to give you the total value of whatever hue you're looking at. If you want to increase it, it's going to increase it for everything inside of that frame. The color boost is looking at the color values from a luminance level. Ideally, you'll see it more affected in the mid-tone range, like the skin. So I'm going to color boost here just a touch because I want to see what happens with this skin, considering all of this golden sun out there is affecting it. So we're just going to boost it up a little bit. And you notice it did just affect mostly the skin. It didn't affect a lot of this back here in the sky because it's not as lit up, but it did affect the sunshine because there's a higher luminance value there. So just boost it up just a touch. Not too bad there. So now, again, everything that we did for this node does not affect the previous node because this is a serial workflow. So if I said, you know what, my shadows they were fine where they were. I like to keep them crushed. You can just disable this node or just reset it and you can still carry on with your workflow. Okay. But I'm going to undo that. But that is the gist of just understanding going from one node to the next inside of Rec 709 footage that you already have that's ready to go for television displays or phone displays, things like that. It's not as difficult as you may think. But now we're going to flip the script a little bit. It's going to get a little bit more interesting because you have a different type of footage. So let's go back to this original log file over here. Now zoom in on my timeline. Let's find a good frame. Something like that should work. So we'll use this as our hero frame to work with. All right, so I'm going to hop into the color tab. Let me move it a little more. I like to try to get it to where the hero's in decent focus. Somewhere right about here. All right. Now this is flat footage. This is not ready for a display. If I went and showed this on the TV screen, it's going to look all boring and no contrast and so forth. And that's because it's a shot in Canon C-Log 3. Now, DaVinci Resolve, as well as any of your other video editors, what they'll do is help you transform it into a Rec 709 format. And there's several ways to do it inside of DaVinci Resolve. First, if you go to this little menu, this little gear down here in the bottom right of Resolve and click that, you get this dialog window here. And you go to the color management tab. And by default, it will say your timeline color space is, I think it'll say Rec 709, and then it'll say your output color space is Rec 709. I highly recommend, for more flexibility, select the color science of DaVinci YRGB, select the timeline color space of DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then set the output to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Doing this will allow you to have a lot more flexibility when it comes to pushing and pulling the colors around and pushing the contrast around and checking with the highlights and things like that inside of the image, because you'll be operating in the Rec 709 color space is a triangle that's about this big. Okay. The DaVinci Wide Gamut is a triangle that's this big, you know, so it's a lot more space to play around with to really take advantage of your dynamic range. So that's why mine are set to here. So I'm going to cancel that out. So that's the first thing. But this is when the node structure comes into play. So we're going to create a new serial node. Actually, we'll create two. Okay, so this node here will be our color space transform. I'll just say CST to Rec 709, something like that. All right, so that's labeled, and then we'll label this one CST1. All right. So now if you hop into the effects tab, you have a color space transform effect over here. So just drag that effect onto your node. This is when it, oop, did I grab the wrong one? I did. Undo. Color space transform. There we go. All right. So this is where the fun begins, and you have to know what you're working with from a camera standpoint. Right here, it says the input color space. I shot this on Canon, so I need to go down and select the Canon Cinema Gamut. Input gamma, again, I shot it on Canon, and I know I shot it with Canon Log 3. Okay. And you can see that it's already starting to look a little bit better. Just it's getting there. And then this one, this is your output color space. We want it to be DaVinci Wide Gamut right now. And we want to do DaVinci Intermediate for our output gamma, because in between here, the nodes that we're going to put in this middle space, it's going to take the data from this node and allow us to be flexible with our color correction. Okay, so I can add a node right now, and this is going to be where we start our actual work with color. Then we have our output node. So we're going to take another color space transform, put it here, and we're taking the DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate, that input, and we're going to send it out Rec 709 so it'll be ready for our screens. Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. There, that's done. All right. So again, it's just a flow kind of thing. So in the middle, in between these two nodes, this is where all of your secret sauce is going to happen right here. Whatever you put in between this node and in between this node. So I can turn that off, make it a little bit bigger, and we'll move this over here like so. So typically what I like to do is I have my first node is, well, this one is actually the first node, but I'm gonna come back to that. You have a color space transform, or CST, that's gonna take it from log to get it ready to work in DaVinci Wide Gamut color space. Your next node is gonna be, I like to call mine balance, just in case the white balance is off. I usually have a hotkey, so we'll just do, whoops, wrong hotkey. Label. I like to call this balance. Then the next node, I'll make another one. I like to call this one exposure. Okay. And then I get into the fun stuff where I make parallel nodes. Hello, Ozone Nightmare. Good to see you. And Mike Martin, great stuff. We'll have to stop back by and look. Hold on. I see chats in here. Thank y'all for being here. What's these chats in here? Carson says, howdy, Hybrid. Oh, Hybrid Media is in here. What's up, my man? And Mike Martin says, great stuff. We'll have to stop back and watch the replay. Take care. Thank you. And Ozone Nightmare, it's good to see you, brother. Thank y'all. Hopefully this is helpful for everybody in here. So let's go back. All right. So yeah, now we're on, this is where the fun is going to begin, because you can build out doing different functions with different nodes. So this is when you create parallel nodes. So I'm going to do, I think it's Command P. No, Option P. Sorry, Option P. Damn it. There. I had it backwards. I'll do it this way. Put it here. Make one more serial. And then I'll make the parallel. Like that. All right. So what's happening here is this node is taking all of this data over here and holding it. And then it's going to pass it equally to these three nodes here, like that. Okay, so for this one, I like to call like contrast. And you can particularly use curves or something like that. Here, I would set this for saturation. So let's say sat. Here, I would make this for like highlights or something, because sometimes you have to overexpose depending on the lookup tables you're using. So I'll say highlights for HL like that. And then all of this is working. These three are working independent of each other. Okay. But they're only being fed the data from this exposure one. So now let's just go ahead and get started. This node here is normally what I would use for noise reduction, because noise reduction is a pain on a computer. It is a lot of hard work on a computer for doing noise reduction on a video. So I do it at the very beginning of the process to make it a little bit easier on the system, but I don't have noise in here. So there's nothing going on with this. There's nothing to sweat. So that node is just going to sit there with no type of touch up on it. But let's start with our balance, because again, this is where we want to make sure the white balance is good to go. We want the whites to look white. We want blue to look blue, green to look green, so on and so forth. And I like to rely on the RGB parade to help figure out if everything is balanced. And quite frankly, this is fairly balanced out. If you just look across the top of this RGB parade scopes here. If I want to warm it up some, I just go to this temperature slider and just warm it up a little bit like that. If I want to cool it off, I just cool it off a little bit. Whoops. So go over there. And you see how the RGB parade is affected when you cool it off. The blue channel pops up. You want to get closer to balance. Right about there. And for those of you that are more comfortable with using a waveform, let's just use the waveform and you'll see a similar instance here. So if I cool it off, it's blue on the screen, but then look at the waveform. You see this blue band right there. You want to try to get those three channels as close as you can right there. So let's pull this back to warm it up some. And as these get close, you'll start to see things turn white inside of that waveform. See, the closer we get to balance, the more you see white start to show up. Like if you look right there, it's a white line, and this is starting to turn white. And even the skin looks so much better. So we're good on the balance there. So now let's move to the next node. Next node is the exposure. And that's just how bright it is or how dark it is. Easy tool. Just go to your offset wheel, this main global offset wheel. Pull it all the way up. If you want to expose it really, really high, don't do that. But that's what that does. Or you can just pull it back just a touch. The exposure is actually okay here, so I'm only going to pull it down just a little. Just a little bit. That's not bad there. I don't see any kind of clipping. I mean, the highlights are a little bit harsh right there on his face, but that's not terrible. But I do want to give this a little more contrast. So we'll go to the contrast node right here. And I'm going to play with the curves tool because that's by far the easiest to me. That gives you more flexibility. Yes, you have these three options right here. You have contrast and pivot to handle the contrast in your image. But I think it's so much more in your control if you just use the curves tool. So I like to start with the highlights. And there's a couple ways you can do this. So this is the easy way. Let me show you the easy way first. You click on that, the very top, and then select the editable splines option here. And I got to that by clicking on these three dots over here on the right. And when I click on the top of the curves, I get this extra dot. And I can just literally drag it however I want. So let's just pull up the highlights just a little like that. And then we'll click on the bottom and it gives us another spline, and I can drag it around however I want. And now let's pull it down a little more to give it just a smooth S curve. And that gives you a little bit more contrast. So now let's just take a look at the difference. If I turn that node off, turn that node off. So this is with the contrast from the curves, and this is without the contrast from the curves. See, blacks look a little bit better. Skin is starting to look a little bit better, and so on. And that's one way to do it. So let's reset it. So I'm going to reset it because I like to do it a little bit more manually. That was the easy way to use the curve tools, just by selecting editable splines right there. So I'm turning that off now. I like to just use the points myself and just push them up like that. And then get a little bit more in control. And again, your mileage may vary. This is just what works best for me. And now, again, we're taking a look at this graph. Notice there's a little bit of crushing happening down here in the shadows. See how it's hitting that zero line? So we need to go back to our exposure. Lift that up some. Lift it up some, like so. Okay, so now we've given it a little room, and then we can go back to the contrast and just pull that up just a touch. So now we're not crushing the blacks. Crushing the shadows there. There we go. And we still have good contrast, but we also have detail still showing up. And a lot of that, folks, a lot of that comes to taste too. There are some people that are 100% against having crushed shadows. I personally believe in some instances crushed shadows are okay. It depends on what the story is, you know. Vicky shows up in the chat. Hey there, Vicky. Thank you for being here. But yeah, it depends on. So if you're shooting like a horror movie or something like that, okay, first off, the lighting's going to be different in a horror movie because they're trying to make it dark. And when it comes to editing, they probably want those shadows to be a little bit darker so they can hide things for suspense. Who knows? So it's all just depends on taste, but this is just a decent guideline for you to use. So now let's move into saturation. Again, saturation, you have the global version of just moving this little slider down here, or you have the color boost here that's looking at the color values from a luminance standpoint. When you're dealing with people, you got to make sure their skin looks right. So first thing, go to the vector scope. Not sure what's going on with my voice, but I got a cough again. Inside the vector scope, you get this little line right here. And this is a skin line. It's like a guide. It's not something that you should like say guaranteed this is where their skin is going to be, but ideally it is. Whether you're black or white or whatever, when you put this cursor on a person's skin, it should show up right along that line. And right now it looks like my skin is good. Yeah. Even down here in the darker areas, that's not as, doesn't have the same luminance level, it's still showing up right along that line. And another thing to consider when it comes to this vector scope is this also part of your balance. If I go back over here to this balance node, all right, and remember we messed around with the temperature right there. I can do the same just by using this offset. And as I move this offset wheel around, watch what happens to the data here inside of this vector scope. Watch as it moves around. The center of that circle is basically perfect balance. See that? And see, I'm moving it more towards the magenta side. And so as I do that, I'm getting more magenta showing up in the frame, which is not good. So let's pull it back. Right about here should be good. Yeah, so I just added just a touch of magenta, just barely a touch. So I got pretty good balance there. And then if I hover over his skin with the qualifier, it should still work. Yep. So let's look at this. All right, now that other clip that we were on earlier, that was already a Rec 709, the rules still apply. So if I click there and hover over the skin, her skin is still on that same line. If I click on her skin, it's still along that same line. The only difference now is there's so much more of a orange and red hue coming in from the sun. But don't care if they're black, white, or whatever, their skin is still riding along that line, which is good. Lets me know we got good color in here. Even this guy. See that? Even down here, the very, very back. I mean, very, very front of the stands there. His skin still on that line. The leg still on the line. Such a cool tool. And this is available in Premiere and also available inside of Final Cut. It's just a vector scope. All right, so now we've made sure his skin looks good. So if we want to boost the color of his skin, just go to this color boost. Make sure you're on your saturation node, because again, you're going in a serial aspect. Okay. So I'm going to boost this color just a little bit like that. And I think I went a little too far on that. So let's reset. There's a couple of things we can do here. I can do what they call a qualifier and only grab a particular hue. So if I turn this on like that, see, this is only going to grab his skin. It's not grabbing his shirt. Unfortunately, it's grabbing a little bit of the green background. There we go. So now we're focusing more so on his skin. Okay. So if I hit this color boost now, let's decrease it and watch what happens to his skin. See that? He turned into the Hulk. But now let's bring it back, give him a little more life. Yeah, it's looking good. It's looking pretty good there. Something like that. And again, if I want to do another parallel node, I can just add another parallel node. Okay, so let's do, whoops, wrong one. Here, so I've added another parallel node. And we can just call this saturation 2 or something like that. Because right now, this node is only affecting his skin. But I want this sat 2 to be a little bit more global. So let's go back to the skin one more time. Let's make sure it looks good. And it looks like I pushed it a little too far because it went off of that skin tone line a little bit. So I'm going to go into this offset, bring it back. Bring it back right about there. And now, and see now his skin is just, it looks a little richer, you know, so fuller color there. Okay. So SAT2, this is going to be for everything. Okay. So I'm just going to push all the way up just for the sake of YouTube, because you won't be able to see it otherwise. And now it's totally oversaturated, but it got everything. It got his skin, it got everything else in the frame. So let's reset it. But I only want to pull it up just a little. Right about there should be good. There. So now, this is, again, this little group here can go a long way in how you create your look, if you will. And then there's this final node here. This is the node that says it is ready to go out to the screens. You see it's going all the way out to the output. This is ready to go for Rec 709 and can be viewed on any platform, any screen, what have you. It's good to go. If I turn it off, let's see what this looks like. It's going to look a little weird. There. So I just turned that. This is with Rec 709. And this is without it. So it still looks a little bit flat. But because it's a little bit flat, I had the flexibility to really dial in and push the color of his skin, the contrast and so forth, and not get a bunch of clipping. Okay. So now for some people out there, they want to get a little bit more creative and do, you know, like the teal and orange look and things like that. And you can, if you want to do that, you want to do it before this node and do it after this group of parallels. So just click on that parallel node and just add a new serial node. And I believe it's Option S. Yep. Option S gives you a new serial node. So here, if I want to give this teal and orange look, I can. So I got my primary wheels ready to go. I'll take the gain and push it towards the orange a little bit. The gamma, push it towards the orange a little bit. And the shadows, I'll push it towards teal a little bit. And just play around with what feels right to you. Okay, so that's one thing. That's one option far as a look adjustment, if you will. So if I turn that off and on, let's see. This is the regular balanced clean, and this is playing around with the hues a little bit more there. So that's one way. So let me turn that off for a second. You have LUTs that are built inside of DaVinci Resolve, and you can also download and install your own if you want. Popular is to use the film LUTs that are available out there, and there's a bunch inside of DaVinci Resolve for free that you can use. But if I try to put a film LUT on here, so let's do this. We'll reset that node. So reset it. All right. And if I try to add a film LUT to it, let's see what happens. LUT. I use these. These are called Lehman LUTs. I bought them. They're like $50 and they're great. Lehman LUT Pro, Canon Log 3. That looks horrible. That looks horrible. Well, the reason that is because film LUTs are not by default set for Rec 709. Okay. So let's reset it again. Like one of my favorite film LUTs here is film, whoops, film Kodak 2383 D60. Most people use that too nowadays. So it looks really, really bad. It's not set for Rec 709. So what do you do here? So let's reset it. And we need to color space transform it. So we're going from DaVinci Wide Gamut, because over here, we were already working in DaVinci Wide Gamut. DaVinci Intermediate, take it to Rec 709. But instead of the output gamma being gamma 2.4, we want to take it to Cineon Film Log, like that. Okay. And of course, because we have this Rec 709 node open, it's a mess. So let's disable that for now. So now we have color in this, but it's still just a touch flat, right? So let's add another node, Command S or Control S. And this is where we'll put our film LUT. This is where we put our CST to film. Okay. So now we'll right click on our film LUT node, go to LUTs, go to film looks, and I'm going to select the Kodak 2383 D60. Now these three designations here, D55, D60, D65. D60 means it's a neutral color temperature. D55 means it's a warmer color temperature. D65 means it's a cooler color temperature. Yes, I know that sounds weird, but that's what it is. So D60, boom. Now that looks way better. Looks really, really good. That, I swear, I love that film look on there. Now, this is ready to go, and it can output to Rec 709. Okay, because it has the film LUT on top of the color space transform, getting it ready for Rec 709. The Cineon film log will get you to Rec 709, but you need to make sure a LUT is applied after that. So that's why this node is over here. If I were to disable these and reverse the order, like so, it's going to look pretty bad. So there to there to there. We'll get that. Not good. So again, you got to remember, this is just, it's all serial. One leads to the other. Put that there. That there. And this, and yeah, I just plugged this into this node, but this node is disabled. It's just going straight to output. Okay. But there, that is it. That is a base node tree right there using a Kodak film LUT. And you can do this for, if you don't want to use a film LUT, you can just get rid of these two nodes here and just work with your Rec 709. Now, I highly recommend, so you don't have to build this out every daggum time you work on a project, right click on your image there, select grab still. And what happens is it sticks it over here in this gallery tab. And I can just label this. Let's say change label. And this is base tree, something like that. So now if I have another piece of footage, going back to my timeline here, and I grab another piece of footage, let's grab this one here. Yeah, we'll grab this one here because I know this is Canon Log 3 footage. And you see it's all flat and stuff. Go into my color page. And instead of building out all those daggum nodes, I can just come over here. And if I know I want to make it a film look, and it is Canon Log 3, you just middle click on your gallery here where your still was, and boom, it built out the node tree for you already. And so you're looking at this and you're like, man, the exposure isn't quite right. Thank goodness you labeled stuff, right? So let's go to this exposure tab. So let's see, we need to lift, looks like our shadows are crushed too. Let's go to waveform. No, they're not crushed. So what's going on here? Balance. Let's cool it all some. There we go. Pull back on these, since we're in exposure, pull back on the highlights a little bit there. So it looks like it's a little bit too contrasty. So let's go to the contrast tab or node and go to our curves and just make those adjustments. Now granted, this frame is not the prettiest frame because they're not in focus there. That's okay. Yeah, these guys didn't really get in focus until they got right up on me. But this is a decent frame though. It's good enough for now. But it allows me to see, okay, my highlights are still just a little clipped. So let's go back over here to the exposure tab or just to the highlight tab. Node, why I keep saying tab? Highlight node, go to the gain wheel, pull it back a little bit. Go to the saturation node. I can pull it all the way back. Pull it all the way up. Now, when I pull it all the way back, did y'all notice what happened? Look at that. Not good. Why is it doing that? We have to think about, we had this one saturation node that had the qualifier for his skin, my son's skin, not their skin. They're not black. So I could just disable that one. And now we get a little bit better performance. Reset that. There we go. There we go. Now the colors are looking good. Yeah, right there. Still think the shadows are crushed just a little bit. So we can start by looking at the curve, and the curve says, yeah, I'm trying to lift the shadow some. So let's go to the exposure. Take the lift, pull that up. Take the gamma, pull that up. There we go. Let's get in there. So what I'm seeing here is in this waveform, it says the reds are getting crushed. So I'm just going to go to the lift in the red channel and just lift it up a little bit. Like that. Just a little, not too much. There. So now we just color graded a whole piece of footage there a lot faster than doing the first one. And it's because we had our node tree already built out. Okay. But this right here, if you want to pause and just sort of take note, this is what I think is an ideal node tree for people that are just getting started. You want to have, if you have the paid version, noise reduction is going to be involved in the paid version. It's not in the free, but everything else is in the free. Start with a noise reduction node. Start with the color space then go to a color space transform node. Have that color space transform convert your footage to DaVinci wide gamut color space. Okay, which is mentioned here. Just click on it, hit the effects, take whatever your input gamma is. In my instance, it's a Canon input gamma, and we're sending it to the DaVinci wide gamma and the DaVinci intermediate output gamma to allow us to play around with our editing here. Next, you want to balance it out. Basically get your white balance good to go. Make sure the whites are white, make sure the blues are blue and the reds are red, and there's no green showing up where green isn't supposed to be. Next node is your exposure node. This is going to make sure you're bright enough or it's not too dark, so on and so forth. And it's as easy as using your offset wheel for this node. Very easy. And if you want, you can go into this HDR tab for your exposure wheel and use these actual controls here. Exposure. These are a little more granular in how they control things. They look pretty good. But most folks, you'll be good to go using the primaries wheels over here, primary color wheels. So that's the exposure. And then you want to do a parallel node. So that would be control or command P on side of Mac. So make a new node, you make a new serial node, and then turn it into a parallel. And that's when you get this little bridge thing right there. And make a couple of them. You may only need 2, you may need 4, you may need 8. Depends on what you're doing. And you can utilize these for whatever task that you want. This is my highlights node. So if I want to play with the highlights, because if I think they're not bright enough, I'm going to hit the gain and just crank those highlights up. Don't do that. Pull them down. Pull them down. Get some details back in that roof like that. Saturation, contrast, and so forth. And once you're done with that, then you'll have a color space transform node that's taking you from DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate to Rec 709, where your video can be viewed on whatever screen that's trying to look at it. Okay, that's finishing and closing the loop. But if you want to use film LUTs, you can do what these two nodes are here. Take it from DaVinci Wide Gamut, get it ready for Rec 709, but for the gamma, you're wanting to use a film log look. And if you're going to do a film log look, you better use a film LUT coming right after it, which is what this is. So you right click, LUT, select the film LUTs, and they got a bunch in here. And you can download many more from the web. Okay. I've also used the Fujifilm. I like the Fujifilm for some of my old football stuff with my boy because of the way the lighting is on the football field, but it looks really good too. So let's see the D60 of the Fujifilm. Yeah, see, it cooled it off a little bit in comparison. And I don't think that works for this scene. I think the Kodak looks better for this particular scene. So let's go film look, Kodak D60 there. Good. I think that works. All right. That is going to do it. Any questions? Just throw them there in the chat. And like I said, this is when you're dealing a node tree like this. I can use it for this piece of Rec 709 footage that's already there if I want to. So let's do that. Let's just see what happens. It made an absolute mess. It made a mess because we're trying to, we got the CST here, this color space transform. It's all wrong. We're not going from Canon log. We're going from Rec 709. Gamma 2.4. And now we want to send it to DaVinci Wide Gamut so we can do all of this color stuff that we want to inside of here. Then we need to go to this one, DaVinci Wide Gamut, Rec 709, film log, good to go. Film LUT's there, good to go. But that film LUT does not look good on this, on that particular piece of footage, you know. So yeah, it's the node tree is built so you can go in and make tweaks a lot faster. Similar to if you're in Photoshop and working with layers, label your daggum layers in Photoshop. Or here in DaVinci Resolve, label your daggum nodes. It'll make things so much easier. I'm going to undo that because that is pretty hard to look at. There we go. All right. But yeah, and then once you got your node tree and got your look that you want, and you think this is something you can rely on in the future using that same particular camera, just right click, say grab a still, and it'll put a still over here. And it'll just save all of your stills for you inside of Resolve, and you just go back and click on them. Like I've already made a power grade of node trees over here. You know, see, this is from Blackmagic. This is from Canon. You know, here's that Fujifilm look that I was talking about. You know, but again, all that stuff is good if you understand what your camera is capable of and figure out the push and pull and what works best for that camera. All right. Okie dokie. So, I see a super chat came in. What? Thank you. Ozone Nightmare, $10 super chat. Great tutorial and process overview is always good. Good info, even if folks using other software, since the fundamentals are pretty much the same everywhere. Thanks for doing this and have a great weekend. Thank you, brother. Yeah, that's the whole point in this. With you don't have nodes inside of Premiere Pro, but Premiere Pro has they have a layer structure in there, and the layer structure is very similar, but I think the node structure is a little bit more intuitive than what Premiere's layer structure is when it comes to doing color correction and color grade and adding different looks and stuff like that. You can do all of this stuff in Premiere. I've done it, but this is way faster. And not to mention, everybody can't pay for Premiere once a month. You know what I'm saying? So this is right here inside of good old free DaVinci Resolve. All right, folks, thank y'all for being here. And as I've mentioned before, I enjoy doing these for the community, but if you want to help support the channel, you can do a couple things. You can hit the like and subscribe button, and you can also join the Patreon community. Just go to patreon.com/AntPruitt. Again, that's patreon.com/AntPruitt. Join the community there. I'm spending most of my time over there going forward because shit's pretty bad, y'all. I'm putting a lot of energy and stuff, and it's not returning any fruit. At least my Patreon members are providing some fruit, and I am grateful. They help me try to pay some bills and have food to eat. So thank you, Patreon community. Patreon.com/AntPruitt. Feel free to reach out. Shoot a message to me here, leave a comment below if you got questions. And I see Mr. Bondi in there. He says layers. Oh, it just disappeared. There it goes. It says layers still make more sense to me, but this helped a lot. Yeah, the once you get into doing the adjustments with film looks, or just you come up after you figure out your grade and you start fine tuning the grade, you'll see that node over there just staring right there at you. You'll see that it's a little bit quicker for you. But yeah, you can do all of this inside of Premiere and inside of Final Cut too. They just use a different layer structure. And then there's just the whole aspect of layers inside of the timeline too. You know, that's another thing. I didn't show y'all that, but you know, you got different layers here in the timeline. Video 1, video 2, you can put adjustment layers and things like that. And adjustment layers work very, very, very well in Premiere. And you have adjustment layers inside of here too. But again, when it comes to doing shot matching and stuff like that, that node tree is really, really fast. Really, really fast. Sweet. Good point, though. Good point, sir. All right, folks. Thank y'all very, very much. Please share this thing out with other folks, and have yourselves a very, very nice weekend. I got some stuff to do right now and get ready to shoot tonight's football game, and get ready for my weekend of just trying to grind and find some more work too. Do something good for yourself, do something good for someone else, and know that it is totally okay to love you some you. I'll see y'all later.